All right, we'll get started. My name is Lindsay Buck, and I run the wine shop and marketplace at Coravin. I also have my WSET 3, which is the advanced certification. And this is William Rolfing.
Hi, I'm I guess the Corbin resident sommelier in residence, however you want to say it. Certified sommelier through the Court of Master Sommeliers and 20-year restaurant veteran working in beverage programs all up and down the East Coast.
Yes.
Happy to be here with the wine store now.
William has worked for some of the best restaurateurs around. We're very happy to have him. And yeah, we're very excited to be here today. This is our first live selling event, so thank you for joining us. We're calling this group of wines hidden gems. What we mean by that is these are some lesser known, less appreciated maybe regions, grape varietals, producers, and we want to bring the information to you. So all these wines can be found on the wine shop at wine.coravin.com. There's really great stuff there. You can check out all the other wines. But yeah, we hope you learn something. We hope you find something that you like out of these wines. Feel free to ask questions as we go. We love questions. Even if you want to try to stump us, great. That means we've learned something. And also you'll see that we've incorporated the Coravin systems into the tasting as well. Whether you're an old hat with Coravin or you're new to the brand, we want to make sure that you know how to utilize the systems and different use cases and everything. And feel free to ask questions about the systems as well. So great.
Yeah, we love questions. I would love to be stumped here. And just to restate what you said, these are things that are out of the ordinary. These are honestly wines that wine nerds geek out about in a lot of cases. They're things that we're down as small as 50 case production on some of these items. Most of these you can pretty much only find either directly from the producer or out of our store as well. So they're pretty special things that we wanted to expose some more people to. This is what we love to do.
Yeah, exactly. So without further ado, we will start with the first wine. So this is an Austrian Sekt. So Sekt, S-E-K-T, is Germany and Austria's answer to champagne. So it's a sparkling wine made in the traditional or champenois method. Namely, what that means is that the secondary fermentation that gives it the bubbles happens in the bottle, as opposed to in a tank, which is how other wines, the sparkling wines like Prosecco, are made. There are 3 varietals in this wine. When we say varietal, we just mean grape. Welsh Riesling, Riesling, and Gruner Veltliner. Did you hear?
Yeah, please.
And yeah, it's a great, oh, and you've probably heard that that wasn't a special sound effect. That was actually the bubbles popping. So we've had this wine open for 2.5 months. The sparkling system is meant to keep sparkling wine and champagne fresh for 4 weeks, but we were super impressed. We just opened this today and we're like, wow, it maintained not only the bubbles but the flavor as well. And just to give a quick demo, so once you've secured the champagne stopper here, you put this is the charger, you just put it on right on there, and there's an indicator light that turns from red to green that lets you know that the wine is charged or carbonated again. So this is a really cool wine, super toasty on the nose, tiny bubbles. On the palate is lots of green apple and some tropical fruit. Really cool alternative to champagne, not a wine that you're going to find in a lot of places.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, one of the fun things that I get to do at Coravin is a lot of blind tasting with these pieces of technology. And although we do guarantee 4 weeks, we have seen some high quality champagnes and sparkling wines last for up to 6 months under this. It's a really impressive piece of technology that shout out to the engineering team.
Yeah.
For what it is. But yeah, this wine, very little sex, makes its way to the side of the Atlantic. It's pretty much all consumed in Germany and Austria. This is a wine that is imported by a gentleman named Michael Skurnick. And as wine nerds, we tend to follow importers because we get to know their palates. We get to trust them, basically, is what it comes down to. And his quote in this wine is that it's the greatest sparkling wine that he's ever had from outside of Champagne. It's a vintage dated 2013. Saw extended aging for, I believe it was 60 months in the bottle before it was released. And it really does taste like a rich champagne, like a Bollinger or something along those lines. But the grapes they're using in this, which are the local indigenous grapes, especially the Grüne Veltliner, bring in some really cool fresh characters, like fresh cut herbs. There's an herbaceous, grassy sort of character in here to go along with all that ripe fruit and like brioche sort of character. Real great wine along with food. Again, very long lived, very impressively long lived underneath there. I think that we were talking about what?
Yeah, food pairings. I think oysters. It's great as an aperitif. Sushi is great with sparkling wine, as is fried chicken. Is now a favorite. Is a favorite with sparkling wine, kind of high low, even though like fried chicken has become very elevated these past couple of years. And I just found out that there's a fried chicken and champagne restaurant in New York now. So there you go. The word is out that makes a great pairing. So
one of my favorites with wines like this also, my favorite wine pairing with crude champagne is actually truffle fries. And I think this would go really beautifully along with that as well.
As I say, what doesn't go well with truffle fries?
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the next wine. And I'm using the Model 5 here. So this is what we call the timeless system, which is the needle function that goes into the wine and then imparts argon gas to preserve it. And
another shout out to the engineering team. We've got bottles around that are showing preservation for up to 4 or 5 years in these. But yeah, really cool product. So this wine is by the Aquilini family. It's a passion project out of Eastern Washington State. So Pacific Northwest. You probably, many people think of Seattle and Washington. You're going to go all the way across the other side of the state where it's a desert. And the area has really made a name for itself for Bordeaux varietals, Cabernet, Merlot, and don't forget that, for white wine, the Bordeaux varietals are Sauvignon Blanc. This is a Sauvignon Blanc very much so made in the Bordeaux style. When I say that, what I mean is instead of being bright and fresh and citrusy and grapefruit like you would get out of California and New Zealand, it's a little more subdued, more serious wine. It sees some time in oak barrels. It picks up a little bit of vanilla character there as well. And then the fruit flavor, instead of being super bright citrus, there's apples and lemons in there as well. And really interesting and really cool to me, I think that with some time in bottle, this is the 2020, so it's got about a year in bottle now, it starts to pick up some earth, some button mushroom, shaved maitake sort of things as well. Yeah, unusual style of Bordeaux that a lot of Americans don't really see, but it's one of my favorites. Their first vintage that ever came out was from 2017. New producer, but doing really, really great job.
Yeah, and the Red Mountain AVA, or AVA just stands for American Viticultural Area.
Place where you grow grapes.
Yeah, it's a very tiny region in Washington State, but it's become one of the premier regions for growing the Bordeaux varietals and producing really, really outstanding stuff there.
Much better value than in a lot of like Napa, Bordeaux, and things like that.
Yeah, that's what happens with these more lesser known or up and coming regions. You get better value. What about food pairings?
Food pairings. Really old school classic food pairing with this would be like chicken a la king. It's like a poached chicken leg with maitre d'hotel butter and then a cream sauce over the top of it.
Yeah.
I think that would be a really cool pairing. I think one thing you had mentioned earlier was it like a puff pastry?
Yes,
like puff pastry.
Kind of capita, like type appetizer.
Something like that, puff pastry. So something creamy and rich and buttery. And then with a little bit of I also think like puff pastry with escargot and a cream sauce, I think would be really cool with this. There's a lot of really interesting opportunity here. Usually you think Sauvignon Blanc, you think just shellfish.
Right.
This is a lot more personal.
Lots going on. Yeah. Awesome. All right. So we are going to go, please let us know if there are any questions.
I do have a good question.
We do have a question that just came in.
Does wine always get better with age? No. Well, this is an interesting and nuanced question.
It's kind of a loaded question.
It is a loaded question. So pretty much everything that you see here is going to have a long life ahead of it. We're curating the selections to be things that you can drink now and drink 10 years from now, in many cases. But the vast majority of wine that's made in the world is actually meant to be drunk within a couple of years of bottling. I mean, think like commodity wines like Barefoot and things like that. They're not really
Most
good.
wine is drunk within 45 minutes of being purchased.
In my house, that's for sure.
Actually the statistic. Yeah.
But these wines here will definitely improve with age. Some of them, when we get into some of these reds, the Syrah at the end, probably a good 10 or 15 years. If we had any, Bordeaux or California Cabernet today, 20, 30 years in some cases, it'll improve more. But eventually there will be a plateau and then a downslope.
Yeah, and certain traits in wine allow ageability. So think about sugar content, alcohol content, tannic structure are different things that can allow a wine to age. So what the most ageable wine kind of widely accepted is Tokai, which is an Austrian dessert wine. It's delicious. I've actually tasted one that was 100 years old. And it's a very high sugar content, not even particularly high alcohol. Is
the best ones actually end up about 5% alcohol.
Yeah, so they're not even high alcohol. They just have amazing ageability, and they start to take on these like secondary flavors like caramel and so it's really cool to taste wines every year, and the Coravin allows you to do that because you can access wines, and we have wines in our office that have been accessed every year for the past 10 years or whatever. So that's a cool way to do that.
And sweet German Riesling and Sauternes are right up there for ageability as well.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, not just red wines that age, some white wines can age really well too. All right, let's go to the Gewürztraminer. So this is kind of like, I like to call it Riesling's little sister. It's kind of a lesser known, lesser appreciated grape. It's one of my favorite varietals. So Gewürz, it literally means spicy Traminer. Traminer is a different grape. It has a very dramatic sounding name to it, and that's not a coincidence.
The wine is dramatic too.
Yes. It's made. You find most Gewürztraminer is in Alsace, which borders Germany, and Alsace has been part of Germany different points in history. Hence the name. Gewürztraminer has this amazing aroma that is so distinct that, like I say, if it's in a lineup at like a blind tasting, it's not even fair, because it makes it too easy, because it's just smacks you in the face. It's lychee, it's rosehip. I love the smell of Gewürztraminer. I wish there was a Gewürztraminer perfume. I haven't looked into it, honestly, so maybe there is. But really beautiful wine. This is a certified Domaine Mann is the winery. It's certified organic and biodynamic since 2008 and 2009 respectively. Just really beautiful, really unctuous on the palate. It kind of envelops your palate. It has notes of like papaya and star fruit. Just a lot going on with this wine. I don't think this wine really needs food, but it's certainly food friendly. What were you talking about? You were talking about a dish earlier where you pair with it.
I agree with you. This makes a really great cocktail. You can just keep going back to this and smelling it. But one of my favorite things last year while I was working in a restaurant, we had a beautiful Gewürztraminer by the glass, and my favorite pairing with that was local diver scallops. We would just slice them real thin, very simple, a little bit of salt, a little bit of fresh citrus, and some Fresno chilies. So something clean, bright, a little bit of heat is a beautiful pairing for something like this. Up next, want to talk about this toy right here?
Yes. So this is the pivot system. So this is the newest of the still wine preservation systems. It's meant to preserve wine for 4 weeks plus. We've had wines that stayed longer, but it's as opposed to the needle system where you can preserve wine for years. This will preserve wine for a few weeks. There's other like benefits to the system as well. You actually pull the cork and put a stopper in, so it doesn't need to be natural cork. It can be a synthetic cork wine, or it can be screw cap. So it makes it a little bit more versatile in terms of the use case. And then it's a faster pour, which a lot of restaurants, wineries that use the system like it for that reason too.
When this came out, this was a lifesaver for me in restaurants. I would say, for those of you who enjoy going to restaurants, you should ask your favorite restaurants, if they're pouring anything that's over $20 a glass, why they don't have the pivot on it, because they may not be selling more than 1 or 2 glasses of that a day, and you want your wine to be fresh.
Yes.
At least I do. But yeah, great tool, good for home too. maybe just want a glass of white wine tonight and then move on to red with dinner. Everything's open, right?
Exactly.
So this is a cool wine that I had been hoping to have the opportunity to taste for several years, and Lindsay was kind enough to source it for the wine shop. This is out of Australia, from a region mostly known for Shiraz called Barossa Valley. This is a small subsection of Barossa Valley that is called, so it's a single vineyard called the Enchanted Garden in Eden Valley. So Eden Valley is a subsection where they mostly grow Riesling. They say that this is the oldest stand of Riesling in all of Australia, at about 120 years old. It's only 7 acres. And the older the vines get, the less production they have. So there's only a couple hundred cases that come out of these 7 acres. The all-female winemaking team right here also, and practicing biodynamic in their growing practices as well. One very important thing to note here is that Riesling is loved by wine nerds because it can do so many different things. It can be dry, it can be sweet, it can be sparkling. We've got a sparkling Riesling earlier here. This is a completely dry Riesling. There's no sugar in this whatsoever. And they're super versatile with food as well. When they are dry, they will have that sort of sensation of sweetness because it is very ripe fruit to it, especially on the nose, sort of peaches and pears. And then the palate, really high acidity, really great with richer dishes. Its ancestral home in Alsace. These wines make very robust white wines that actually go really well with charcuterie because it has so much acid to it. Really great with pork belly, things like that as well. Yeah, like hollowed with a cream sauce would be a wonderful thing as well. Ooh.
Another question?
We do have another question. This is one of my favorite questions to nerd out about too, so I'm not sure. Thank you very much. What's the difference between organic and biodynamic? So 2 things I'll say first. One thing I mentioned about this last wine was they are practicing biodynamic. It means they haven't been certified. The certification process is expensive, and if you're only making a couple hundred cases, you can't really in many cases do it. So think of organic as being reductive and biodynamic as being additive. If you're doing organic, it means you're taking away everything that wouldn't be natural. You're taking away any unnatural fertilizers, any non-natural pesticides, fungicides, things like that, and you're just letting the land do what it'll do. Biodynamics agriculture is sort of bringing things back to the way that things were grown a couple hundred years ago, when we were really in tune with the land and really understood it and listened to it. So a lot of the things that they do are adding specific fertilizers at specific times of the year, interplanting with different cover crops. Like you'll rotate rye, which is a grain, with different kinds of flowers, and it puts different kinds of things back into the soil. It'll add nitrogen back in, it'll add calcium back in, and it makes for a healthier environment. It's less of monoculture, and it really makes for better wine. I was having lunch with Paul Hobbs a couple of years ago, and one of the things that he told me he loved about biodynamic agriculture is that it made him a better farmer because it made him pay attention to what he was doing. And after that, he considered himself to be more of a dirt farmer than a grape farmer, which is cool.
It's all about the dirt.
But that is a long answer, I guess, to a short question.
No, there's a lot of nuance, and there's a lot of confusion, understandably, between the two. And, organic is there's different thresholds you have to cross in order to be certified organic in each country. And they're, historically it was kind of used a lot as more of a marketing tool than anything. And they've kind of like cracked down on that to make it more official. So yeah, do we have any other, please jump in if you have any questions. Otherwise, what about food pairings for the Riesling?
Oh, food pairings for the Riesling. Like I said earlier, really great with pork products, pork belly, charcuterie board. This would be wonderful with, what's the word that I'm looking for? It's a combination of cooked fruit with mostarda and prosciutto. Mostarda prosciutto on a cracker. This would be really great with, I think, playing with those fruit flavors, and also you got all that acid to marry along with the richness and the fattiness of pork.
And Riesling, it's kind of a misconception that Rieslings are always sweet. They can be sweet. They can range from super bone dry to really, really sweet. And that's where, you know, our brain kind of fools us because we associate any sort of fruit flavor with sweetness, which makes sense. So a lot of the time you might get fruity character and notes in a wine. Doesn't necessarily mean that there's sugar content there. This wine is like a little off dry, but it's not terribly sweet. Off dry just means a little bit sweet. Yeah.
Cool. So moving on to the holy grail of most winemakers, this is a Pinot Noir, which is generally considered to be, if not the most, then one of the most difficult grapes to grow, or at least to grow well. In a lot of places, if it doesn't have the best site for it, it'll make lean wines that don't really have a lot of character. Its ancestral home is, of course, in Burgundy. Outside of Burgundy, pretty much the first place that was ever found where it made really high quality wines is in the Russian River. This is out of the Russian River. It's the Halleck family that have been making wine since 1993. This is a bottling that is called the Three Sons Cuvee. It's literally named after their children. Again, very small production on this, about 350 cases of wine a year out of this specific bottling. And what I really love about this wine and Russian River in general, when it's done very, very well, is it has a very specific flavor profile to it that's very different from Burgundy, very different from good quality Oregon, a very different from good quality New Zealand Pinot Noir. I refer to it as being like cherry cola. It's got dark Bing cherry fruit flavors to it, as well as like legitimately it kind of smells like RC cola a little bit, in a really good way. And then it's got a really cool sweet herbaceous character to it, some tarragon, sort of that star anise, but not quite as woody and stemmy. On the palate, I really like the texture of this Pinot Noir. It's rich without being heavy. The big thing you're always looking for with Pinot Noir is power without weight. So like it fills your mouth with flavor. It's really impressive and unctuous, but it's not heavy in your palate. It doesn't overwhelm anything. The wine is really beautiful. Food pairings always duck with cranberries, duck with pomegranate sauce, something along those lines. Pinot Noir does always just generally like any kind of fowl birds. Yeah, guinea hen was one that I really like with it as well. If you have a more robust Pinot Noir.
Great, awesome. The next wine is a Croatian wine that we sell on the site. We actually sell a few Croatian wines, and I believe the importers of this wine have joined us today. So thank you, Marina and Win. So this is a Plavak Mali, which is the most widely planted grape in Dalmatia in Croatia. This particular wine is in Kamarna, which is a village within the Dalmatian coast. And Plavak Mali, the name comes from Plavak means blue and Mali means small. So the grapes themselves are small blue grapes. If you look it up, you'll see it for yourself. So this is a really cool wine. I'm going to use this wine to do the systematic approach to tasting. So when you see professionals tasting wine and they're swirling, they're sniffing, and you kind of want to know like what's going on there, what are they doing? So first I'll just kind of go step by step, and this is a good way to just kind of learn what you like too, and to be able to identify those flavors. So you tip your glass against a white background so you can see the color of the wine, and you can make some observations there. This is kind of like a garnet color. It's like a little bit, you can tell there has a little age on this wine. Wines like reds tend to lose color as they age. Sometimes they get like a browning around the rim, but this is kind of a watery rim, so it's not super old. Then you swirl the wine, and what you're doing here is you're releasing the aromas in the wines. You're actually doing something where sometimes people just might look pretentious doing this, but they're actually, kind of doing something.
What are you trying to say about me?
Well, William gets a pass.
Thank you.
And the next observation you can make in terms of sight is the legs. So when you say legs, it means the wine actually sticks to the side of the glass. And some people will make comments like, oh, this has great legs or whatever, but legs aren't really indicator of quality. It's just the result of the sugar and or alcohol content that causes the viscosity so that it sticks to the side of the glass. So we call them in the US, we call them legs. The French call them tiers. The Italian call them arche, and the Germans call them church windows. So everyone has their own take on them. The next thing you do is smell. And, our sense of smell is our most primitive sense. So it's really hard for humans to make that cognitive connection. So a lot of it comes down to the power of suggestion. So we even like as professionals, sometimes we'll have like an aroma wheel next to us that has like all the different categories of aromas. Because all of a sudden somebody will say, oh, I smell cigar box. Be like, oh, I smell cigar box. So, you know, there's so many different aromas, and it's, don't feel bad if you have a hard time identifying the smells. You know, like dogs, for instance, I think their sense of smell is like 200 times sharper than ours. Humans just are not that great at it.
Plus, just like anything else in the world, it's practice. The more you practice, the more you'll be able to pick up specific smells.
And then when you taste a wine, and a lot of times you'll see professionals spit when they're tasting. One, you don't need to swallow wine in order to taste it. Everything that you need to taste is in your mouth. And second, you know, the more you taste, the more your senses are dulled, as some might have experienced before. So you want to, if you're tasting like through 100 wines at a tasting, you need to stay fresh and astute and kind of, you know, alive. So anyway, when you taste the wine, you want to look for a few different things. You want to look for the weight of the wine on the palate. Is it light, medium? Is it full bodied? And then you can make observations about how much acidity the wine has, what the tannins are like, and whether it's dry or sweet, and the other flavors that you get in this wine. So this is a really cool wine. We were saying before, like a lot of times you can even lesser known grape varietals, you can like hit them on that. You can say, oh, this is just like XYZ. This wine has its own character. It's really unique. It's really like cool. It's really earthy. I get some spice, but it has like some nice bright red fruit too. What do you get in this wine?
I mean, the big thing to this one that I really love is the texture. It is really smooth, really mouth-filling. If you like a soft textured California Cabernet that's pretty bold, this might be something you might want to give it a try too. But yeah, a lot of earth, almost like some vegetable sort of character. This is what I'm gonna have to keep going back to just to keep exploring.
Yeah, what about food pairings for this one?
Food pairings for this one. Definitely meat, red meat. Dry aged duck breast last year that I think would go really well. It's probably a dry aged red meat of some sort because it does have that funky, earthy character. Really play with that sort of blue cheese sort of flavor that dry aged meat has.
Yeah. Please feel free to jump in if you have any questions. Otherwise, I will go to the next wine. So this is a bonus wine that I didn't actually advertise that we'd be going through, but I felt like it would be a cool. Yeah, it would be a cool thing to match up against the Martinelli Zinfandel we're going to taste. So this is it's called Tribidrag, and this is the original Zinfandel. So this is from Croatia, is also from the Dalmatian coast, and so it goes 2,200 years ago. The Romans brought Tribidrag to Italy, where it became known as Primitivo, and then eventually found its way to California, so we know it as Zinfandel in the U.S. But it's really cool to taste, especially when you're talking old world versus new world. So old world just means Europe, and new world is everything else. So to taste the same varietal from a different place with totally different expression is just super cool. So love this wine. It has really like brambly fruit on the nose, and on the palate, it's really concentrated. It has depth, but it's not the jammy juiciness that you get from Zinfandels in the US usually. So totally different expression, super food friendly. From what I've seen of pictures and being on Zooms and such with, folks in Croatia, looks like an amazing place. So, it's not a region that's ubiquitous in the US as far as the wine goes, but, one
of the things I love about newer wine regions is that you can always find good value there.
And so we should be careful we say newer. I mean, it's the oldest wine region. It's not super well known. It's very old. But don't count it out when you're thinking of like a vacation or something. It looks incredible. I'm sure the wineries would be more than happy to host you there too. And they're making really, really cool stuff. So
yeah, I really like the structure in this one, especially if we talk about this as compared to the Martinelli. It's got a lot more tannin to it, a lot more richness on the palate, darker fruit flavors. And it's just really cool. I love horizontal tasting, same grape from different places just to see how winemakers can really adjust the way that not winemakers and region can change the way that things are. Here, this is actually the Martinelli.
This is my Martinelli. Okay, jumping ahead of me. All right, so this is the Martin. So this is Zinfandel. That you might be more familiar with from California. This is Russian River Valley. This is the 2018. 2018 saw a longer growing season than 2017. 2017 was kind of erratic with high heat, heat waves and lots of rain. Whereas 2018 saw a longer growing season. They harvested in September, whereas 2017 they harvested in August. So with that, you get a really nice, ripe Zinfandel. This does have some of those like jammy, juicy notes on the palate, which is just what people generally love about Zinfandel. But it has a lot of structure too. It's not just like a juice bomb or anything.
Yeah, the Martinellis always make really good qualities. Zinfandels, they are, I think, always marked by more restraint than, say, the Prisoner or something along those lines. It has rich, ripe fruit, but it's got more going on. It's got some sweet leather, star anise, and some earthy character there as well. But again, just the really cool part here is the two different Zinfandels from different places, and they're I mean, there are similarities, but they're very, very different wines.
Completely different expressions.
Very different food pairings. I mean, definitely does something dark, rich meat with the Croatian, and then the California. I think I had a salad recently that was blue cheese and strawberries and balsamic vinaigrette and spinach. And I think that's the right move with that. So very, very different food pairings for two very, very different wines.
Yeah, that would definitely do with that wine for sure. Awesome. All right. Are we on to the last wine already?
So it appears.
We are.
So it is. All right. So this is a fun wine. This is I guess this is an exclusive, isn't it?
This is an exclusive Coravin wine. The winemaker is actually a team member of ours at Coravin. And I was saying earlier, I'm like, I can barely put a load of laundry in, and he's making wine. So like in his spare time. So it's really, and it's really good wine too.
I will say I tasted this before knowing that Chris was a team member at Coravin, and I was very impressed with it. So I did blind taste myself on a back, and the wine is very good. But so it's Puppione Vineyards by Chris Puppione. We actually ended up with an interesting Sonoma County flight here, didn't we? So this is out of Russian River as well. I personally have a love affair with Syrah. My favorite grape is Syrah. My favorite place for it is the Northern Rhone. I think its second best home in the world is probably the Russian River, which is, and I guess rightfully known for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, but it's really making inroads in Sonoma County and Sonoma Valley, the last 10 years or so. It shares a lot of similarities, growing and also flavor profile with Pinot Noir. It's more medium body. It's not full bore like the Shiraz you would expect out of Australia, but sort of dark cherry fruits and some medium body. What I really love about these wines is that with a little bit of bottle age on it, this is the 2017. We also have the 2018 in the store. They really start to show some really interesting secondary flavors to them. This one is starting to really smell like cured meat a little bit. With a couple more years of bottle age on it, sometimes they'll smell like cooking bacon, jasmine tea, and they are great wines for grilling. One thing that jumped out at me with this one as well, as a food and wine nerd, I'm actually curing some meat in my basement right now. I have some Brezola hanging and also some pork loins that I've cured and hung. And this one definitely smells like curing pork loin, if you've ever had the opportunity to smell it.
In a good way.
In a good way. So I'm excited to be able to go home, get one of these bottles, and in a couple of weeks when my cured pork loin is finished, slice that up and have that along with this.
And share.
Food and wine is for sharing.
Please share. Great. So that's the end. Those are the wines today. We hope that at least some of these sounded appealing to you. Welcome feedback. If there's any wines on the site that you'd like to see, feel free to email wineshop@coravin.com. We really love engaging with customers. This is relatively new venture vertical for Coravin, but obviously it makes a lot of sense. So we're excited to be able to engage with our customers in a new way, in this way.
And with that being said, even if there's things that you would like to be able to buy, but you can't because they might not exist in the market,
Yeah.
that's one of the things that we have a lot of fun searching out. So let us know anything, even if you think it's ridiculous. I do have actually one other question coming in, asking how important is vintage in a wine? You want to field this one?
Yeah, I'll field this one. So vintage variation means something different in each region. So vintage just means the year in which the grapes are harvested. And in some regions you get really wild fluctuations vintage to vintage. So like in France, you pretty big differences vintage to vintage. Other places like in the Southern Hemisphere, like South Africa and Australia, there's pretty much consistency with vintage to vintage. So yes, there are like star vintages. There are certain years that people are very highly coveted. But yeah, it just really, the vintage just comes down to the weather, you know, and like, also, you know, other natural disasters, you know, like was it 2020, the years of the fires and all those fires in California, you know, like some of the, you know, wineries, you know, had to, you know, just cut down a lot of, or they couldn't use a lot of the grapes because there was like smoke taint on some of the grapes. And then, you know, the yields became smaller. And sometimes like when a vintage, there's just less yield in a vintage, then that becomes coveted. If you're not able to make as much wine, then obviously the demand goes up for it. So for whatever reason, if you couldn't yield as much, then that becomes like a more coveted vintage. So there's a lot of different like elements to it. Did I hit on?
Oh yeah, I think great. I just wanted to touch on a couple of things you mentioned. The last one you mentioned, especially in New World regions like California, they haven't had a bad vintage since 2001. 2011, even people say was bad, but you know what? A lot of people that don't like super ripe wines loved it. Their white wines were great. The big thing is that in a lot of vintages is they're just shorter vintages, which unfortunately makes the prices go up for things. Right. Old World, the biggest difference that I like to mention is you look at back-to-back vintages in 2002 and 2003, you couldn't have more different years. 2002 was well known for huge rainstorms during harvest, and 2003 had huge droughts and heat waves. So you ended up with one vintage having a lot of places that just didn't make wine all up and down the Rhone Valley in northern Italy. And then the next vintage was so hot and cooked that it tasted like port. So yeah, Old World versus New World, very, very different. But when you're not sure, choose a producer you really trust. Producers that you really trust, a lot of these guys here, they're not going to make wine that's bad in bad vintages. They might make very short amounts of their wine and sell off their grapes to other less reputable producers. Yeah. I've got one here. What wine region do you think is a hidden gem? Well, we got the Dalmatian coast here. One that I really love recently that's maybe not as much of a hidden gem anymore, but Mount Etna out of Sicily, I think is a really beautiful place. If you're looking for great value and you like really big, robust red wines, I'd suggest that you look for Sagrantino from southern Italy. Super long-lived wines that get really interesting. Sagrantino by some people is Antonio Galloni referred to it as the Nebbiolo of the South. So equating it to Barolo, its much more famous cousin from further north. Austria, I think in the United States doesn't get as much play as it should. Some of the Gruner Veltliners are some of the greatest wines in the world.
Croatia,
of course. I mean, those are a couple that I really go for.
Yeah, I think there's like underappreciated regions too. Like we mentioned it before. My favorite Merlot that's being made today is out of Washington State.
Definitely.
And
dollar for dollar, the best stuff out there.
And I'm not the only one who thinks that anymore, for sure. But it's kind of not like widely known. Like people still associate, like when people think of wine, they think of California, you know. So I encourage you, and for better or worse, because of climate change, mostly for worse, you know, it's the latitudes where you can grow certain grapes is actually changing. So like, it's interesting to see like 10, 20 years from now, like even in the last, like I went to Cornell and I used to go on wine tours in the Finger Lakes, right? And then I went back to visit like a couple of years ago. So like 15 plus years after graduating, and they're growing red varietals there very successfully now. And I was like, wait a second, that wasn't really happening when I was there. So it just kind of shows you the changes in climate change, how different regions, I mean, they're like, you know, my husband lives in Buffalo, New York, or is from Buffalo, New York, and we've gone up to the Niagara region, which is mostly known for its like ice wine and stuff. But
they're growing red grapes up there now too.
Yeah, but if you go, that's actually cool. That's a little bit of a hidden gem because it's so unexpected, because you're in like, you know, kind of a industrial area generally around Buffalo, and then you're like Niagara Falls, which is kind of like a circus now. It's just like a Disney World with you know, surrounding a waterfall. And you go into the Niagara region, and it's kind of like this wonderland of wine. Like you wouldn't expect it there. It's beautiful, and there's some beautiful chateaus and estates, and you know, they're leaning a lot on like the ice wine and like Rieslings and the more like Vidal Blanc, those grapes that grow better in a cooler climate. But cool, like if you happen to be up there, like a really fun day, and they've got some great restaurants and stuff too. So I would say that might be a hidden gem. Long Island, actually, I've been to some of the wineries there, and you know, you don't think about wines from Long Island, but they have got the maritime climate. They're out in the water, you know.
If you look
so
straight east for the
really,
North Fork, you hit Bordeaux.
Yeah, so it's like the climate there, and that's also kind of surprising. So if you go into I think I was, you know, if you're going to the Hamptons or whatever, you know, you happen to be kind of in that area, that's actually a great place. The Finger Lakes too, of course, is making great stuff.
And one last shout out to the local. We've talked about this one before.
Oh yeah.
There's actually a winery in Westport, Massachusetts called Westport Rivers. Definitely a hidden gem. Some of the best sparkling wines made in North America are coming out of there. They do really great still white and red as well, but I've always loved their sparkling wine.
Me too.
We're 15 miles away from there right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, about that.
You can probably get there on a boat faster. So every state in the US makes wine, which is pretty mind-blowing. I've had delicious wine, like sparkling wine from Virginia. You know, like Texas is the oldest wine trail. Actually, I've been through the Texas wine trail between Austin and Fredericksburg, which is pretty interesting. It's different. But yeah, so anywhere you go, really, you're actually gonna find wine.
Try the local product.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for joining us today. We had a lot of fun. We hope you did too. Again, feel free to reach out, wineshop@coravin.com. Check out the wines, and yeah, we'll see you soon.
Thank you for being part of it.
Cheers.